Hi, I'm Dr. Charlene Walters, author, business and branding mentor, trainer, as well as your host for Launch, a business talk show for anyone who wants to launch their business, their career, or their life. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Launch. My name is Charlene Walters, and I am your host. And today we have an amazing guest. His name is Joe Diorio. He is an author, a writer, and an editor. Welcome to the show, Joe.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I have always been a writer, I realized, whether that was writing and drawing my own comic books as a kid. Yeah, I really did that. Or being a stringer for a local newspaper when I was in school, writing speeches for corporations, working in public relations. And having spent most of my career doing that, I realized I have only one marketable skill. That is, I can write a simple declarative sentence. And because I use a dictionary, I almost always spell all the words correctly. But that's been a good career building on that skill.
That is a really good skill to have. I think we're so heavy to rely on auto check and spelling and all that today. And it's
Yeah.
also, almost becomes a detriment to us.
It does. It does. I have maintained years ago, I said spell check makes us bad spellers because we rely on that. I argue that some writing tools make us bad writers because we stop worrying about what's the difference between affect and effect.
Right.
And I have nothing against Chat GPT, but you have to remember that that is a good tool to create a first draft, and
Right.
that's it.
Agreed, agreed. So many people are worried about it, but it really can't replace us, the writers.
No,
Sure.
no, because it doesn't write anything original. It goes back into other massive databases, but it does not write anything original.
Absolutely. So you said you got your start writing comics. Can you tell us a little more about the comics you used to write? What were they like? What were they
I
about?
I was a kid of the 1960s, Charlene, and I was fascinated with Batman and Superman, and I would create my own superheroes. And what I realized looking back and doing is I was learning the old concept of creating a story structure,
Yes.
uh, the classic beginning, middle, and end. And I became I was rather proficient at it, and I'm either relieved or sad that I didn't save any of the comics that I wrote.
Oh,
But
that's
they did teach me a lot of basics, and as I say in the book, I'm largely self-taught when it comes to English grammar. But
very
this
good.
things
Very.
like that really help me.
You've, as you mentioned, written a few books. Can you tell us about the books you have out, the books you're writing, and how you
Sure.
became a published author? What was your journey like?
um, my first book is titled "A Few Words About Words." The subtitle is "A Common Sense Look at Writing and Grammar."
Yeah.
And it is an outgrowth of a monthly blog that I have been writing for on and off, mostly on for 30 years. And it was a blog that started out as a paper newsletter and it morphed into a blog, but I used it as a tool to generate business when I worked as a freelance writer and I was self-employed. It was just a thing that I would mail to prospective clients and current clients. And I found it was a nice low key way to remind people that, hey, I'm out there. And should you need a freelance writer, please think of me.
Very
Um,
good.
and it worked. And finally, I realized I've got 30 years of these columns. Let me pull some of them together. And and I did that, and I created a book proposal and started mailing it around, reminding myself that authors like J.K. Rowling sent Harry Potter around to dozens of publishers before they got a yes. And fortunately, I had worked in higher education, so I knew some people in the book publishing business, and I shared my proposal with them, and they shared it around. And basically, the gestation period of the book was like in this goes back to 2020. In June of 2020, I shared it with a friend of mine who was a book publicist. She shared it with a publisher called Beaufort Books. When I didn't hear from them after 2 months, I thought, well, nothing ventured, nothing was gained. But
You're right.
surprise, surprise, in September, they came back in September of that same year. They came back to me and said, we want a full manuscript. We went at the end of the month. I went, gulp,
Uh,
and had the whole thing together. By November, I had a contract, and by the following August, the book was published, and it has sold modestly well. For it was not a big press run, but I do a presentation on selling a book during a pandemic, because the book came out in the middle of the pandemic, and nobody was going to bookstores, and nobody was doing launch events, and nobody was doing book fairs. So I had to find all other ways to just create that book browsing environment, uh, which I was successfully able to do by doing silly little things like I would create YouTube-based game shows.
okay, perfect.
Yeah, I was the host. I'd get two people to come on and ask them a couple of questions about grammar, and we would just have some laughs about it. But it was a way of just reminding people the book was there. It was the
Yes.
same genesis as the newsletter. I know you're not going to buy it right away, but you're never going to buy it if you don't know about it. So I just created these things just to build awareness, and it was working. You and I met by Instagram. That was another way that I went about just creating awareness of the book. I would just take little tidbits about grammar and I'd create Instagram posts about them and
It's
built up a pretty good
amazing,
following.
how you can get to know people through social media and learn about them. And I'm with you. I also published during the pandemic, and I realized you had to get really scrappy really quick.
It really did. Yes.
Stand out. It was kind of like a boot camp for authors, I guess, if you look at it that
Yeah.
way. But you said a few things which I can really relate to, and I think the audience probably can. I talk to a lot of people, and they're not really excited about blogging. They want to write for Forbes, they want to write for Entrepreneur. But as I tell everyone, I think blogging is an excellent way to start out and sort of polish your craft with writing. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree, because you could write a blog that perhaps is not your best effort, but you have done that and you build on that skill from there. And I would add also that writing a blog, it gives you something to refer back to in other social media activity. You mentioned being scrappy to sell your book, and uh, I wrote a blog where one of my biggest grammatical pet peeves when I look at social media is if somebody has an accomplishment they want to tell people about. It's totally fine to do that, but they will start their social media posts by saying, "I'm really excited, so proud to say,
Yes.
got to share." Okay, stop it. Okay, I know you're excited. I know you're proud. Yes, you should share. You don't have to tell me all of that. Get to the point of why this is important. And I always remind myself of that. And I wrote a blog on that subject.
Oh,
Uh,
great.
and I'm constantly referring back to it. I'll do posts on Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook, or even back on Instagram. What I'll say to you, people, stop it. Stop starting your social media post with "I'm really proud."
Yeah.
Really? Because that's what you're telling me. Have you ever seen a post where someone said, "I'm ashamed to say"? No, no, you haven't.
Boy, it
So
really sucks I got this award. I wasn't expecting it all. Now I have to deal with it. Yeah, that's totally true. I think that is a really valuable post for people that have that kind of issue, and I'm sure that you're helping them a lot. Something else you said about your journey to becoming an author is that you kind of talked yourself out of the rejection that you knew was coming, and I think most of us have to do that. Can you
yeah,
share some tips that you used for dealing with those rejections as they came?
sure. And I think partially my ability partially came from the fact that I worked in public relations for a long time,
Yes.
and you'd write a press release and send it around, and most of the time the press release wouldn't get used, or your story idea that you pitched to a reporter gets rejected. And I remind myself, it's something that I affectionately call, you have to be a little bit of a baseball fan to get this. I remind myself of the Reggie Jackson theory of success. Now, Reggie Jackson,
I remember Reggie Jackson,
yeah,
actually.
very good baseball player, and he's in the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. And people are shocked when I tell them, "Do you know that he set only one record in his entire career? One record, and it's a dubious record, and that is he struck out more than anybody else in the history of the game. So his record is failure." Yet he's in the Hall of Fame. That failure has nothing to do with it.
Right.
So you get the mindset, you understand that people will reject a good idea. When you're trying to publish a book or get a publisher to say yes, keep in mind that for a lot of publishers and a lot of acquisition editors, it's a lot safer to turn down a book. There are editors out there. I mentioned J.K. Rowling a moment ago. There are acquisition editors out there who probably turned down Harry Potter. And the
Right.
thing is, they don't have to tell anyone they turned down Harry Potter.
I wouldn't tell anybody that one for sure.
Yeah. So, it's a matter of understanding that a rejection will happen. It's not personal at
Right.
all. You just and again, it's the old Rocky Balboa thing. It's not how hard you get hit. It's how hard you're hit and you keep moving forward.
Right.
Um, Rejections are going to happen. It's just a natural part of life, I guess. And
Right.
I like my Reggie Jackson theories. Like the dude's famous, and he set one. He's only and nobody talks about that record. They talk about home runs in the World Series, which they should. They talk about his accomplishments other accomplishments as a player, which they should, and nobody worries about the strikeouts.
Right. I know. And I always tell people that too. They get so down and they really want things to happen quickly, and nothing really worthwhile ever does happen that fast. You really have to find a
Exactly.
way for
Yeah.
dealing with failure and kind of moving forward, as you said. What would you say, Joe, most inspires you?
I get inspired by people who actually have a good stick-to-itiveness attitude about them. I get inspired by people who believe in themselves. I get inspired by people who uh, just get up every day and keep going. My father got up every day for 40 years and he went to work in a factory. I hate to sound like a cliche like that, but you know, he stuck to it. And that's the kind of thing that really impresses me. I'll tell you someone else who really, I always think my wife is a big fan of the TV show Shark Tank, and
Yes.
I'm really impressed by Barbara Corcoran because
Yes.
she started her career and everyone's telling her you're never going to make it. You're a woman in this business. Like, oh my God, you really said that to her? And she kept going. It's like, don't let the naysayers get you down because I have I have friends who I told about a few words about words when I was putting it into book format, and I have friends who said, "Oh, no one's ever going to publish that thing," and I just thought, "All right, fine, that's your opinion, and that's
Yeah.
great."
I
You know,
was just thinking about it today. I was at a party somewhere and I was talking about wanting to become an author, and like an acquaintance kind of just openly laughed at me. And I thought, that's so funny because you can't really listen to people or let them bring you down or get inspired or anything. It's one
yeah,
of those things where you have to just kind of stick with what you want to do. If you
yeah.
had to do your career differently at this point, looking back, what would you have done differently, if anything?
I wouldn't have done a whole lot differently. I would have. I have fun with the fact that my first book was published when I was 65 years old. Um,
That
and
is,
I used, hashtag never too late.
yes.
And I probably would have tried to write a book sooner if I'd done that. But other than that, I would have, there's not a lot different because there are things you have to learn along the way.
Right.
When I became a speechwriter, I was really terrified on day one of that job because I thought, I don't know how to do this job. You know,
Yes.
I might as well not don't put a lot of personal items on my desk. I won't be here that long. And I've had the good fortune of working for a guy who was a good public speaker, and he understood how to work with speechwriters, and so that worked out well for me. So, there are things that I needed to do along the way in my career to get me to where I am, and I don't look back and say I needed to do this or that or the other thing differently. That we are where we need to be when we're there.
I agree. Sometimes it's not the direct path we would have wanted, but I think eventually you end up there no matter what, where you're
Absolutely,
meant to be. And
absolutely.
even if you didn't set off doing something that was really in your heart, I think it finds you in
Yeah,
the end, and
yeah,
you'll get to that point where you can use all of your skills, all of your values, everything you care about, and it comes together nicely, I
yeah.
think, ultimately.
When I was in college, I had a lot of professors say, "Oh, you've got this great broadcast voice. You should go into broadcast journalism." Well, I got a face made for radio. Um,
Ah, no,
and
that's not true.
I, I joke about the fact I went to college with a fellow who had a good who has had a really good career in television by the name of Jerry Penacoli, and I jokingly say Jerry stayed tall, kept his hair, went into TV. I come from a long line of short, swarthy men. Obviously, my hair went away, and I've got a great face made for radio. Um, but that's again, I wanted to stick with a certain career path, and sometimes people will try to steer you in different directions, and you've got to be able to listen to your own internal compass on those things.
Yeah, definitely, and do what you're meant to do. And speaking of which, I started reading your latest book that's coming out. And in it, you mentioned that you were involved in a mass shooting, which is just unbelievable and I'm sure very scary for you. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. The book is called Murders at Trask, Crisis Communications and the Art of Making Nothing Happen. And my personal experience with that is, this was 40 years ago. I was working at a suburban Washington, D.C. office building. I worked for IBM, and in late May 1982, a former employer drove his Lincoln Town Car through the front door. It was a glass door and a glass foyer. And he got out and he was armed with two weapons and he started shooting. And yes, he did shoot at me, but I had ducked. Um, and I, along with four coworkers, were trapped in an office, one office in the building, and there were closer to 300 people who worked in that building on that day.
Wow.
And this was before the era of having cubicles in office buildings. Everybody had an office, so you had this big suburban office building with uh, doorways and offices that were closed, so that people were just trapped in there. And the gunman stayed in one of those offices, and the SWAT team had to go by door to door and get people out. And what prompted me to write the book was not so much the incident of the shooting itself, because sadly, um, I'm a member of a club that's growing in population, and it's
Yeah,
one of those clubs nobody wants to join. Uh,
absolutely.
but I remember thinking back to how IBM handled PR and communications afterwards, and I'm careful not to throw any disrespect at IBM, because the company was really good at public relations.
Right.
They were exceptionally good at product publicity, but this idea 40 years ago of crisis communications was completely new, completely different, and they were playing a lot of catch up. In a lot of different ways. So I thought, okay, my niche is writing about communication skills. My first book was about writing. Let's do a second book on how do you build a crisis communications plan. And there's an old saying in PR that good crisis communications planning is the art of making nothing happen. You have a bad incident happen, but you want to get back to work, back to normal as quickly as possible. and
Right.
and that's what good crisis communications does. So I told the fictional story of a shooting at a suburban Washington office building, and how the company handled communications and handled the PR during the incident, with examples of other organizations that were drawn into this event, and how they handled it, and in particular how one didn't handle crisis communications planning. So it's an interesting. I call it a novel in two parts. One part is about the shooting itself, and the other part is a deep dive into crisis PR planning. And hopefully, it's the kind of book that not only someone who enjoys a good read will like, but people who work in PR who need to convince their clients that you need to do crisis communications planning, that they'll show that to their clients and say, "Come on, you got to read this book." So
What are
it's
quite an experience, and I'm sure it's really impacted you in a lot of different ways. Has it changed how you live, would you say, or?
You know what? It didn't for the longest time, although sadly, because shooting incidents are becoming more common, um, I find myself occasionally hitting the brakes and stopping. Like my wife and I will go to a movie, and
Right,
every once in a while, I stop and I say, "Well, do I want to? Do I want to just wait till it comes out on a streaming service? I have a 60-inch TV." Um,
right.
I don't have to worry about the guy sitting in front of me with a big hat if I watch the movie at home. And I also don't have to worry about being shot at.
which is important.
So, yeah, yeah,
You don't want that. Yeah, I mean, I can understand that was really scary, and I've had my own brush with tragedy and tragic
yeah.
things happening in my family, and it does sort of change the way you live and the way you look at life, and you sort of treasure those moments, and you are a little more cautious. And I mean, how could you not be, for sure?
Yeah, you become more cautious and you also become more appreciative of every single day. And
Yes.
that sounds awfully new age, of me to say something like that. But if you understand that, this is just a short time we're around here. So, enjoy what you have in life and enjoy the blessings that you do have because things can change pretty quickly.
Absolutely. I know that too. They certainly can change. So I'm going to mix it up a little bit here. I have a fun show I like to play. It's called If You Tell Me Yours, I'll Tell You Mine. So would you like to play, Joe?
Well, let's do this.
Okay, first question. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Bridgeport, Connecticut.
You did? Oh my gosh, that's so amazing. I grew up in Prospect, Connecticut. So we're both
Oh,
from
wow.
Connecticut.
Okay.
Yes.
I went to high school and college in Bridgeport.
Oh, very nice.
Because I could afford to go to college there. I was accepted at New York University, but I didn't have the money to go there. So I went to the University of Bridgeport.
That happens. I went to the University of Connecticut, so we both
Okay.
kind of stayed there for college. Did you head to Florida after college or?
No, I'm slowly working my way around.
Yeah, I think Florida is a really, really great place to live. My next question for you is, what's your favorite snack?
Oh my God. Right now, if I have to be really decadent about it, it is Entenmann's chocolate covered donuts.
Oh, those are really awesome.
Not healthy, but there you go.
I try to keep that kind of stuff out of the house, but
Me
I
too.
I end up eating it anyways.
Right, it just finds its way into the house.
It really does. Potato chips
Yeah.
are my weakness here. I go and get those. And I think with writing too, right? You want to get up and get a snack every now and
Yeah,
again and
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
writing. And
Yeah.
do you write when you're in the mood or otherwise?
No, I make myself write every day, even if what I write I think is terrible. The whole process is making it a profession and making it something you do on a regular basis. The late David Halberstam was really adamant about that. It's like if you call yourself a writer, but you don't write every day, then you're not really a writer. Um,
Right.
and you're going to have some days when what you write isn't very good, but that's okay. Write every day.
Do you write first thing in the morning or late at night?
Usually around, I'll try to, I still keep it to a regular work day. Around 8:30, 9 o'clock, I'll sit down and I'll start writing. And depending on how much I can get done, I might stop by noontime.
Gotcha. Well, that's a good. Yeah, I find that my best writing is also sort of in the morning too. I'm more focused
Yeah.
then. And it's funny because I used to consider myself a night owl, but I've definitely veered off from that, and now it's more of a morning thing for me too.
I bring my notepad into the den with me at night. If I'm either watching the news or reading a book or watching a movie on TV, I'm still scribbling ideas and stuff. So
Good for
uh,
you.
yeah, I try to keep at it.
You do. It sounds like you do a great job. What about vacationing? What's your next vacation?
Oh, that's easy. It's one of the reasons we moved to Florida. Uh, we like going to the resorts at Walt Disney World.
Oh, how nice.
And my brother-in-law, who has traveled the world, one time said to me in his best snooty voice that he was affecting that, well, Disney is all fake. They just do everything there to make you happy. And my response was, yeah, and they're really good at it too. So I let them do what they're good at.
Why veer off of that, right? My kids love going to Disney, Universal, everywhere around there. I mean, it's their favorite thing to do. I think we probably have a trip coming up there as well this summer. And I have another trip to Italy, which I'm super excited about.
Very nice. I have not been there, and although I would like to someday, because obviously my dad's family is from there, and would love to visit that.
Where about in Italy are they from?
They're from one of the northern provinces. I think it's called Ariane.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, we're going to Florence and Rome and maybe a bit of the Amalfi Coast. So packing
Very
as
nice.
much as we can in. Hopefully we won't eat too much while we're there. But it should be fun either way.
That's great. That is terrific.
Last question. Would you rather be a butterfly or a dragonfly, and why?
Um, I think a dragonfly has a longer lifespan, so I'll pick them. Butterflies have shorter lifespans. I thought you were going to ask me what my ideal career was going to be, and I've always told people I wanted to be a relief pitcher for the Red
Oh,
Sox. But that's okay. If I pick butterfly or dragonfly, I'll do dragonfly.
a
Uh,
relief pitcher would be fun too. But yes, I agree. Probably I would pick a dragonfly too because for some reason they land on me wherever I am. So I think that's sort of what I'm meant to do. What got you away from baseball? Why didn't you follow up with that one?
oh, one of the reasons I did that is I have an eyesight disorder called nystagmus, Nystagmus. I wear these because I'm nearsighted, but I have a mild case of nystagmus that's bad enough that it affects my depth perception.
Right.
So, growing up a fan of Mickey Mantle, I was actually a very bad outfielder.
Oh,
And and because you have bad depth perception, it throws your timing off with being able to hit a pitched ball. So that's kind of why I didn't follow through on that. I did other sports, but
wow.
wasn't that good at baseball. As much as I enjoy the game.
I've never been great at sports, so I leave that to the others as well. Pilates is my sport, I guess. Well, that brings us to the end of this show here. It's been so much fun talking with you, Joe. Where can
Thank
the
you.
audience find out more about you?
They can go to Joe Diorio, writereditor.com. That is my website. Obviously, my book's available on Amazon. Once again, it's called A Few Words About Words. Um, and they can also find me, of course, they just search my name on Twitter, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and any of those places. So I'm easy to find there too.
Great. So everyone be sure to check out Joe and his book. And until next time, we will see you again on Launch.